you don't have to write this first information on your record sheets. I'm Mr. Hansler, and I'm going to be presenting 20 lessons to you this year in a program that's called Thinking with Science. And I have two main goals. One is to teach you some universal laws of science, 20 different universal laws of science. A universal law of science is one that's true everywhere in the universe. Other planets, other solar systems, other galaxies, okay? The other thing I'm going to be trying to teach you is how to improve your thinking skills. Most people understand a little bit about what science is, but not too many people understand what thinking is. Thinking is when you look at a bunch of information, analyze it, and then use it to draw a conclusion. So you're going to be analyzing a lot of information this year, and you're going to be drawing a lot of conclusions. Now, I'm going to help you more with these first couple of focuses than I will in the future, because you're new to my methods, and my methods are different from those of most teachers. So I'm going to help you a lot more today in the next lesson than I will in the future. Okay. In the upper left-hand corner of your paper, write your first, print your first and last name. I'll be grading all these record sheets eventually, and I want to be easily able to tell whose paper it is. Then you'll put the date. Okay, 10/3/07, and then you'll write the word focus. The word focus in Latin means point. The focus is going to be the point of our discussion each time. The first focus is called eggs A and B. All right, then I'll ask you a question about the focus, which becomes the problem of the session. And then after the problem, you're going to write the conclusion, which is an answer to the problem question. But we never write a conclusion until we have enough information to support it. All right, the first focus involves these two jars of clear colorless liquids, A and B. Take the lids off. And I also have some eggs, A and B. I'm going to put egg A into liquid A. And I'm going to put egg B into liquid B. And you should be able to see that A sinks and B floats. So the problem to be solved is, why does egg A sink in liquid A, but egg B float in liquid B? I'm shortening my sentences because I have a limited space to write up here, but you should carry your longer sentences all the way across your paper. Okay, that's the problem to be solved. Brandon?
Are we allowed to write something different? Like I wrote, why does egg A sink but not egg B? But why not egg
Well, you have to have this part though. Why does egg A sink in liquid A and egg B float in liquid B? You have to have the whole thing.
Okay.
Okay, you're going to try to answer that question by gathering information, and that brings up another Latin word. Data. You don't write the data, I do. You don't write this. Data in Latin means information. And some people say data. It doesn't matter whether you say data or data, they're both correct. The way you gather your data to answer this question is by asking me questions that I can answer yes or no. Okay, that means you're not going to begin your question with why, when, how, what, because I can't answer any of those questions with a yes or no. But I can answer questions yes or no if they begin with is, was, were, does, that sort of thing. Now I'm going to help you more today, I told you, because you're new to this program. This looks like water in here. And a lot of fifth graders that I first start working with assume that all clear colorless liquids are water. But you're going to find out during the program this year that I use a lot of clear colorless liquids that aren't water. So even though you're assuming this is water, you have to verify or confirm everything with a data question. So here's what the first data question will be. Does liquid A contain any water? You're all assuming it's water, so let's ask about water. Liquid A. Yes. Okay, now, it doesn't do any good to know that unless you know the same thing about B. So that calls for what's called a control question. A control question is just like, I'm going to use ditto marks to save time, but a control question is just like the original question except the letter. Does liquid B contain any water? It doesn't do any good to know this unless you know this. All right. Yes. So, in order to write a conclusion, we have to find a difference, and we haven't found a difference yet. So here's the next question. I'm going to tell you all the questions I want you to focus on. Okay, so here's what we should ask next. Does liquid A contain only water? That's important to know. Very important to know. You're going to learn to use that word only a lot in my program, because it's important to know that in many cases. Liquid A contains only water, yes. All right. Now, Wyatt, do you know the control question? What is it, Wyatt?
Does liquid B have only water?
Contain only water. We know it contains water, now we want to find if it contains only water. No. Okay, we found a difference, so we can start a beginning or what's called a tentative conclusion. Don't ever write the conclusion until I tell you it's final, because you're going to find that I often change my conclusion as I get more data. That's what a good scientist does. When they get more data, they often change their conclusion. So here's what we can write so far. Because, don't write it yet though, because this is only tentative. Because liquid A contains only water, but liquid B doesn't contain only water. Now, you may feel like that's not saying very much, but we know a lot more about the focus than we knew 5 minutes ago, so we're making progress. Now that's called by a couple of words. It's called valid, which comes from the Latin word for true, and we'd also call it reliable. We can depend on that, make predictions based on that. Here's why we can call it valid and reliable. The data we've gathered support it, and none of them refute it. Now, I haven't given you that word refute. That's a new word too. To refute means to prove false. And you see people trying to refute statements a lot in in TV trials where the lawyer is questioning the witness on the opposite side, and he's trying to refute the statements that the opposing witness made, trying to prove that they're false. To refute means to prove false. I'm going to use that a lot this year too. So by the end of the year, you'll know very well what that means. Okay, so these data we've gathered support this, and none of them refute it. Now, if that was a yes, it would refute that conclusion. You can refute a conclusion with only one data item. You can't prove a conclusion true with only one data item. But the more data items you have supporting it, the more confidence you can have. You know, 2 is better than 1, 3 is better than 2, 4 is better than 3, 25 is better than 4, and 50 is better than 25, and 100 is better than 50. So the more data you have, the more confidence you can have in a conclusion. Well, we know that now we know that B is different from A. So what do we have to find out next? What general thing? Nothing specific, but what general thing? Jeremy?
Is like, are the eggs different? Like,
Oh,
is it like a goose egg?
I'm glad
chicken
you
egg?
brought that up. This conclusion is supported by those data. Data is either plural or singular. But this is either happening because the eggs are different or because the liquids are different. It has to be one of those. But there's an experiment we can do with the eggs to find out whether it's because of the eggs or the liquids. Who knows an experiment we can do with the eggs to find out? Nathan?
Take A, B out, and put in
Okay,
the thing in there.
we're going to switch the eggs. Now, switching the egg calls for 2 experiments. And that brings up another kind of question, important question. It's called an experimentation question. You're going to get a chance to ask a lot of experimentation questions this year. They always begin with if. Here's what we're going to say. This builds on what Nathan said. If you put A into, it's not in, it's into because it's going from one place to another. Liquid B, will it float? Okay. Now who knows what the other experiment is? What's the opposite experiment, Chase?
Put B in A.
And just change the letters. Will it sink? Now you're going to get a lot of chances to ask experimentation questions this year. And if you ask a question about an experiment that I can do, I'll do it. I'm really glad you brought that up, Jeremy, because I had almost forgotten to do that. Okay, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to take B out of here. And we're going to put A over here. Does it float?
Yes.
All right, now I'm going to put B over here. Raise your hand if you think it's going to float. Raise your hand if you think it's going to sink. Well, I can tell that most of you just did some thinking. You observed what happened here, you thought about what happened here, and then you made a prediction here. That's thinking, and you're going to get a lot of practice at that this year. All right, so the answer to both questions is yes. Well, those 2 experimentation questions prove something very important. Who can tell me what they prove? What do they prove, Emily H.?
They proved that the eggs are the same and the liquids are different.
Okay, not quite. You're almost 100% correct. They prove that the liquids are different. So they prove that it's because of the liquids. They don't prove that the eggs are the same. The eggs might be the same, they might not. Like Jeremy said, one might be a goose egg and one might be a chicken's egg. We now know that that doesn't matter. It's not because of the eggs. Those 2 experiments told us that. So, what kind of question don't you have to ask from now on? What kind of question don't you have to ask, Jessica? Questions about what?
The eggs different.
The eggs. We don't have to ask anymore. So, by doing that, we eliminated about half of the possible questions. Otherwise, we could spend the whole hour asking questions about the eggs and getting nowhere, because it isn't because of the egg. All right, so we've had a control question, we've had an experimentation question. You're gonna know a lot by the end of this session, and for the next session, things will go more smoothly. All right, now, we know it's because of the liquids, not because of the eggs. We know that A contains only water. We know that B doesn't contain only water. So who can figure out what we ought to find out next? Emily, B?
What other liquid is in the B?
What else is in B? Okay. Now I'm going to use a technique that I'll be using a lot this year to make it a little easier for you, and also to stimulate you to think. Here's what I'm going to do. I do this a lot. Does B contain any blank? Yes. All right. Now I'm going to give you a series of clues about something I put in B. Don't suggest anything until you narrow it down to one substance. Okay, that makes it pretty difficult. All right, I'm going to give you a series of clues. It's a solid. It's not a liquid or gas. It's a solid. It's granular. It's not powdery or lumpy. It's granular. Granular solid. Found in the kitchen. Well, there are there's at least a dozen granular solids found in the kitchen. You haven't narrowed it down to one yet. Okay, it's white. Now, who knows something that fits? A white granular solid found in the kitchen. What's something that fits?
Sugar?
Sugar fits. What else fits, Janelle?
Salt.
Salt fits. Okay, now one more clue. You should all know what it is.
It is already.
It's not sweet. So what does it have to be?
Salt.
Turn your name. Oh, I see your name tag is up. It's just blocked there. Okay, Jay. Oh yeah, the B contains salt. Now, we could put that in here, but we have to ask one more question. Does B contain blank, 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 salt, and water? Let's see if anybody has already learned what word goes in the fourth blank. Anybody know? What do you think, Jessica? Only salt and water. We have to find that out. Yes. Only salt and water. Okay, now this is still valid and reliable, and none of the data refute it, but now I can add to it like a good scientist would with more data. So here's what I'm going to add. A is